Hi, it's Dr. Maureen O'Hara, and I'm going to go over some tips on how to write scientifically. So scientific, technical writing, scholarly writing is more formal than the way we speak, and we do not use slang and colloquial terms, but we do use scientific language and medical terms. And we write in the third person. So in scholarly writing, we prefer to use the active voice over the passive voice. So with the passive voice, we don't know who's doing the action. And we like to give credit to the authors and researchers who have done the work. So with the active voice, the subject is doing the action. So for my example here, Kelly concluded XYZ. So some substitute words for concluded: demonstrated, indicated, opined, contended, found, showed. I know the literature uses the term revealed, but it's really not good practice in scientific writing. Okay, so here are some examples of sentences written in the passive voice that we can turn around and make into the active voice. So full-time nursing faculty members were found to be dissatisfied with their workload. Instead of saying were found to be, we can just take that out and say full-time nursing faculty members were dissatisfied with their workload. The authors in the Nygaard et al. Study compared work ability to multiple strength measures. Here we can just say that the authors did the work. So Nygaard et al. Compared workability to multiple strength measures. So by using this running text citation and having the authors doing the work, you're kind of using double duty here so that you don't have to keep putting a citation at the end of the sentence. A study conducted by Evans explored the predictive value of certain variables. So instead of saying that the study was conducted by Evans, we can just have Evans doing the work. Evans explored the predictive values of certain variables. Okay, anthropomorphism is giving human qualities to objects, and so we can't say that studies, results, findings demonstrated anything, interpreted anything, concluded anything, suggested anything. So again, we want to try to have the authors doing the work. So this study deduced that without intervention, obesity trends will continue to rise. Instead, we can have the authors say that. So Jones and Miller's deduced that without intervention, obesity trends will continue to rise. This study created 3 scenarios for microsimulation. So the study didn't create anything, it was the researchers who did. So there's 2 ways that we could handle this. We can say 3 scenarios for microsimulation were created. That's using the passive voice, and have the citation at the end. Or we can have the researchers doing the work saying Jones and Miller's created 3 scenarios. The literature showed high attrition rates among this group of students. Again, we can use the passive voice. High attrition rates among this group of students were demonstrated, and then we have the citation so we know where the information came from. Or we can use the authors as the subject. Allen stated high attrition rates among this group of students were demonstrated. Okay. So here's another one. The results showed a significant correlation between otitis media and speech, language, and school achievement in the first 3 years. And we can turn that around and have the author doing the work. Thiel et al. Showed significant correlation between otitis media and speech, language, and school achievement in the first 3 years. So studies can't conclude anything. So we can, again, we can handle this two ways. We can have the author doing the concluding. So Jones concluded that 45% of the students who were taught using bilingual approach did not have literacy delays of more than 1 year, and that sign language and oral skills were linked to the success of the literacy skills. Or we can use the passive voice and say 45% of the students who were taught, and have the citation at the end. So sometimes, even though we prefer the active voice, the passive voice does have its place, and it's helpful again when you're trying to not have human qualities applied to the inanimate objects. So many prospective studies have reported, so the studies can't report anything, contradictory findings, but instead we can say that the contradictory findings have been reported about effects of otitis media on language development. My other example here is a study on Croatian population was done where phenotype analysis was performed on patients with hearing impairment. So we can use the passive voice to not have the anthropomorphism. Phenotype analysis was performed for patients with hearing impairment from a Croatian population. Presented data from 7 studies focused on language impairment and found that the communication partner would need to be included in the therapy sessions and be educated and utilize support groups. So in order to turn this around, the sentence I came up with was the inclusion of communication partners in the therapy sessions and their education and utilization of support groups were the results from 7 studies about language impairment. Some other things I can point out about this sentence is that, remember, we spell out the numbers 0 to 9, and there are 4 exceptions to the rule, which are age, time, units of measure, and scores, like Likert scores. So studies doesn't fit into any of those exceptions, so we're going to have to spell out 7. Because I have partners, I can use their. So I did that. So this is a nice way to turn this sentence around. A study used a convenience sample of 55 people who were deaf at Gallaudet University in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So the study didn't use the convenience sample. The researchers designed a convenience sample. So one way we could use the passive voice here is to say a convenience sample of 55 deaf participants from Gallaudet University . Sorry about my dog there. A convenient sample of 55 deaf participants from Gallaudet University in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area were included in the study. So another thing I wanted to point out about this is that we like to call the study subjects participants or patients or clients in terms of being sensitive about how we label people. Okay, when you have vague subjects like researchers stated XYZ, researchers have discovered, scientists have been studying, when you make these broad sweeping statements, you really need a citation for every researcher, whoever stated whatever it is that's in the balance of the sentence. So that is not a good lead-in. You can have the author of the article say the researcher stated XYZ, so we can do that in order to fix it. So according to the literature or according to studies or according to statistics are, again, not good lead-in sentence introductory phrases for the sentence. You can say according to the author's name. We can always attribute information to the author. So here's my examples. Jones reported that scientists have been studying whatever the topic is. Jones stated many researchers believe. Jones stated there are many studies to support, whatever it might be. So instead of according to the studies, we can say according to the author. The other way I turned that one around was to use the passive voice. One of the leading causes of health-related burdens is due to neuropsychiatric disorders. So it's much better to use the author's name and attribute the information to the author, because we always like to give credit to people who do the work. Although I just want to remind you that the passive voice may be appropriate, and that sometimes what it is that you have to say is perfectly fine by itself and can have a citation at the end. So instead of having this vague researcher support, we can just make the statement and put the author's name at the end. Same thing here. Instead of having this vague researchers suspect, we can just go ahead and use the sentence that's perfectly good and have the citation at the end. On the other hand, we want to try to be precise and concise in our writing. So by saying in a study by Bangeray and Parnes, they conducted a study on the safety, it's like you don't need all that. You can just have the authors doing the work. Bangeray and Parnes conducted a study about the safety of intratympanic steroids and other factors that could enhance hearing recovery. So again, having this long lead-in is not necessary. During the Eder, Kahan, and Cirque study, it was recorded. Again, we can just have the authors doing the work. Eder, Kahan, and Cirque recorded how patients complained of a burning sensation in the ears and throat when using intratympanic methylprednisolone. So I know sometimes with these lead-in sentences, you're trying to pack a lot of information into one sentence, but it just becomes difficult for the reader. It's kind of the reader trips over these things. So that's why it's much better to be more precise about it, tighten it up a little bit. So instead of having a trial by these authors showed how intratympanic steroid injection of methylprednisolone reached higher amounts of concentration in the paralymph than oral steroids, we can just have the authors doing the work. Labadeza and Alonso showed how intratympanic steroid injections of methylprednisolone reached higher amounts of concentration in paralymph than oral steroids. And again, here's the passive voice starting this sentence here. All of this is passive. It was noted in the animal study by this person that the steroid dexamethasone lasts 6 hours, whereas methylprednisolone can last up to 24. So I can use this information as an introductory phrase, so that way I can let the reader know that it's not a human study, it's an animal study. So in an animal study, Chandra Sakar found that dexamethasone lasts 6 hours, whereas methylprednisolone can last up to 24 hours. So I've said the same thing, but it's just much tighter. The other thing is that you really want to be precise in your writing. This, that, these, and those are adjectives, and they really need nouns to go with them, or replace this, that, these, and those with a phrase that you mean. This cannot be used as a subject of a sentence, and you're leaving the reader to fill in that blank, and it may not be what you mean. So that's the other reason for being precise. Also, it just makes your writing so much stronger if you can do it. So here's some examples I have. Instead of teaching adults to learn, androgy theories are based on helping adults to learn. This gives the instructor and adult learner grounds for mutual learning and development. So this what gives the instructor. This theory gives the instructor and adult learner grounds for mutual learning and development. The other thing is that you can combine these two sentences, and sometimes this is a better idea because then you don't have to repeat yourself here. So instead of teaching adults to learn, androgy theories are based on helping adults to learn, which gives the instructor and adult learner grounds for mutual learning and development. Because it is common for water to be stored outside of the household and in a container that is uncovered, this is providing the perfect environment for mosquitoes to breed. So by just saying this type of container, now it's clear what I mean in the sentence. The other thing here is to combine these two sentences together using a comma with which. Also, saves space if you have a space limitation, and prevents having to repeat yourself a bit. What is the other one? It's not wrong, but it's just not precise. And it's amazing to me how defining what means gives the sentence so much more strength. So try not to use what as a placeholder for what I just said or what was said in the previous sentence or what I mean. Don't have the reader guess what you mean. So here are some examples. What participants were trying to convey could be changed to the information participants were trying to convey. What was called corruption could be changed to so-called corruption. What is best for the patient could be changed to the best course of action for the patient. What the patient wants could be changed to the patient's wishes. Here's some other examples. Culture is a large part of our worldview and assists us in making sense of what we know of the world around us. So we could change that to culture is a large part of our worldview and assists us in our understanding of the world around us. Confucianism, as it relates to Chinese culture as being bound by service and obligation to a strict set of rules for what is socially proper. We can change that to Confucianism as it relates to Chinese culture as being bound by service and obligation to a strict set of rules for social propriety. Perhaps a combination of all the suggested remedies is what is truly needed to repair the perception of various cultures on those with disabilities. And we could rearrange this sentence to say, perhaps a combination of the suggested remedies is all that is truly needed to repair the perception of various cultures on those with disabilities. Education for society and advocacy for people with disabilities may be what gives those with disabilities opportunity and hope for greater acceptance in the future, which could be changed to education for society and advocacy for people with disabilities may be the impetus that gives those with disabilities opportunity and hope for greater acceptance in the future. So just by defining what, you give much more strength to the sentence. Okay, if possible, try not to have phrases between the subject and the verb that don't really describe the subject. And sometimes it's easier to move the phrase to become an introductory phrase at the beginning of the sentence, or sometimes it can be moved to the end. So here's some examples. Such top-notch frameworks include, in addition to other things, learning about the present and the future necessities. So it is not wrong to have this phrase set off with commas, but it causes the reader to stop and stumble a bit. Just by moving it to the beginning of the sentence, it flows much better. In addition to other things, top-notch frameworks include learning about the present and future necessities. Same thing here. Purpose and identity as essential components of the construct of meaning are not autonomous or self-existing elements. Again, this is not wrong. It just is a stumbling block for the reader. As essential components of the construct of meaning, purpose and identity are not autonomous or self-existing elements. Occupational therapy, as denoted by its title, is a profession that employs its emphasis on the how of occupation. So just by putting this at the beginning here, this phrase, the sentence just flows much better. As denoted by its title, occupational therapy is a profession that employs its emphasis on the how of occupation. Here's an example where there's a phrase between the verb and the object. His parents reported before the intervention the child would become very frustrated with his homework. By moving this to the beginning of the sentence, it just flows much better. Before the intervention, his parents reported the child would become very frustrated with his homework. 5 patients, according to these people, complained of mild ear pain after the injections. So just by moving this to the beginning, now the subject and the verb are together and it just flows much better. According to these people, 5 patients complained of mild ear pain after injections. Medication, according to Bandre et al., may be ineffective when an inflammatory disorder beyond the cochlea is involved. So again, this is not wrong, this is correct. We do put commas around ing phrases, but just by moving it to the beginning of the sentence makes the sentence flow much better with the subject and the verb being together. Okay, when you're using tense for the verbs, we use the past tense when we refer to something that's over and done in the past. So most of these studies that you're going to be referring to, the conclusions, the studies are over and done, so we're going to use the past tense. So my example here is there were 28 million diabetic patients in the United States in 2008. We use the present perfect tense for something that's started in the past and still continues in the present. So what's the present perfect tense? It's using the to be, the derivation of have, has, had, with a verb, like a helping verb, in order to suggest that something has been done in the past and is being done in the present. So several investigators have used this method. We use the present tense if the condition or the procedure that was used in the past is the same as it is now in the present. So here's my example here. Normal values for hemoglobin A1C are 5.7% or less. So I wouldn't say they were because they still are. So that's why we can use the present tense. For dissertations, projects, practicum projects, 5-chapter papers, usually the tense is the past tense because the data has been collected and the project is over and done. So for most of that paper, the past tense is going to be used. We do use the present and future tense in the 5th chapter or in the conclusion section to discuss implications and recommendations, because those are things that are going to be done either now or in the future. Okay, understood in academia is that we do not use the title of a source or journal article or the name of the publisher. We use the name of the author. We like to give credit to the people that did the work. So do not say that an article was written by so-and-so or an article published by so-and-so. Use the author's name. So in my example here, a publication by Tsai et al. Compared the outcomes using intratympanic dexamethasone. So we're just going to have the authors do the work. Tsai et al. Compared the outcomes of using intratympanic dexamethasone. So again, we don't care that the article was published in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine. We just want to know the information. So instead of having that lead in, I'm going to have the author do the work. Kemperman said mutations of CX26 are most common cause of autosomal recessive deafness throughout the world. And the other thing I want to point out about this is that the in-text citation is author, year, and then we've got the page number where the quotation is located. When we do the running text citation, we put the author and the year together, so there's no separation of the author and the year, but you can separate out the page number and put that at the end right next to the quotation. So that's all I have for my tips for scientific writing. If you have any questions, please email me at omaureen@nova.edu, and you can call me. I have office hours during the week and on the weekend from 3 p.m. to midnight Eastern. If I'm home, I will answer the phone. So thank you very much for your time and attention.